Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com, also video presentation. So the simulation, I just thought I'd throw that in before I do a couple of comments and various subjects, blah blah blah, but just demonstrating to some extent that these arguments about somehow I have not thought about what I'm saying, or I haven't spent literally years researching the subjects. It's just a waste of time to make these silly accusations that I have some ignorance of the complete story, because it's just not the truth, okay? I have watched extensive physics lectures by professors and, hundreds of them. And anyway, and then I have designed a simulation of charge that is so simple in how it functions. I mean, there's just pushing, okay, it hits and it sticks and the energy moves with the object, or it reflects, or it merely changes its nature. That is, a red bit goes into a green object, that is, a proton force goes into an electron and it comes out a proton force. And it perfectly duplicates what a charge would do. If you could actually animate a charge by Maxwell's rules, it perfectly duplicates the function. All right, the protons perfectly reflect each other, the electrons perfectly reflect each other, and the protons and the electrons attract. It's not a nothing event to create such a simple mechanism, to create a function that physics has no explanation for. Nothing. They just say, well, there's some kind of fields, and the fields somehow do it. That's all they have, okay? Nothing, okay? So yeah, it's just a waste of time talking about these silly little insults about how I don't understand or I'm ill-informed. It's just such a waste of time. Your obligation to explain how, for example, the perfect simulation somehow isn't perfect. Okay, that the simple rules don't actually produce nucleic action. Okay, the creation of a nucleus. And of any of the other assertions I make about the absolute consistency between what this bullet-style force, this straight line particulate force, can accomplish, okay, in terms of creating patterns that you would call a photon and patterns that you would call magnetism. All right. Because what I'm saying is absolutely true. It's absolutely true if I could move an electron at the speed of light, that you could understand that whatever was in the field, radio waves, any kind of stuff, that it would definitely blue shift it all. That is, it would compress all of the energy from any signal that was going to hit it, and it would collect it and compress it and release it at whatever point it stopped moving the speed of light. And that if it went in the reverse direction, if I could actually move something at the speed of light, that it would literally become invisible, because nothing could reflect off of it. The only thing you could ever see is some sort of internal heat. And even the internal heat can't mean anything. That is, the vibration of electrons on the surface can't mean anything if those vibrations are moving away at the speed of light. All right. Nothing can reflect. Nothing can catch it. Brother. Anyway. All right. So let's go to the comments. And just, I'm sorry, but it is kind of irritating to have to go over and over some of these subjects. All right, back. Sorry, so the first comment was, I'm so confused on the spring argument. So, it seemed to me to be a simple enough argument that there really shouldn't be too much trouble in terms of understanding the point being made, blah, blah, blah. But unfortunately, so I'll try doing it another way just for the fun of it. And, I do have to organize these videos, but really the obligation here is, if you're really going to interact in this conversation, I mean, the two websites are noted for a reason, because there are videos that highlight subjects. Okay, and you should seek those out if there's some particular subject you're interested in. And you think I'm missing something obvious regarding that subject, then you should watch those videos and attempt a response to them. Frankly. And some of the kinetic energy ones are only 5-minute videos. I mean, they're designed to highlight a particular part of the evidence, and all you have to do is argue that evidence. That's science. Arguing the evidence is science. It really is. That's what it's supposed to be. Jesus. All right, so the spring argument. Let's just pretend, okay, for somebody trying to understand the spring argument. Another good argument, by the way. I'm just saying, some of you people could concede that, yes, I never thought about that. I hate your guts. I can't stand what you're doing. I hate your videos. But I'll concede, yeah, this is something they should have talked about, because springs aren't what they think they are. They have assumed something about a spring, and the assumption is wrong. Springs aren't fair. They're unfair. It just happens to be that's the way it turns out. All right. So we have the same, let's just say, mass with momentum. Okay, instead of the spring. So just think of the spring as a mass with momentum, because that's what it is. All right, and you're going to move it a velocity. Okay, and the trick is that the spring. Well, see, you're always stuck, because obviously if I took an object and moved it slow or I moved it fast, I'd be changing how much momentum that object had in pushing. So, but just think that their momentums are the same, even though one's going to move faster than the other, because that's how the spring actually works, right? Okay, well, anyway, so it's going to push something. So you're going to understand, you're going to push something that the object you're going to use to push it, all right, has to go the speed that you're going to push the thing. So the thing can't leave, okay, at some velocity that is any higher than the highest velocity the pusher can go or did go. So the pusher, if this is going to leave at 40 miles per hour, let's say, then the pushing object has to go 40 miles an hour. All right. And there's a point, you can just know logically, there has to be a point where the thing pushing is going 40, let's say, or 39, and the thing that left, the surface, is going 40. So there's a point where this is going 39 and this is going 40. Now in this other case with a heavy object, the top speed is only going to be, let's say 10. Because it's 4 times heavier, let's say. So we could just say 9. So there's going to be a point where this pusher, because it's pushing a bigger object, okay, so one's pushing a small thing, the other one's pushing a heavy thing. This one, the top speed is going to be 9, and this is going to be leaving when it's going 10. So it'll go, the pusher will push that last little bit at the maximum speed, and now the pusher is going to start going slower than the thing is pushed. But now it's not pushing anything. So now there's nothing for it to push. Get it? So it's got it really easy now, but it can't give away the energy. So what it's going to do if it's a spring is, you can understand, it oscillates back and forth. So this is going to oscillate back and forth at 9 miles an hour. This is going to oscillate back and forth at 39 miles per hour. So you can understand that it's the same device, and if it's moving 4 times as fast, it's going to have a lot more energy still in it. So that energy couldn't have gotten into the object because it's still in the spring. So the spring can't give the peak velocity to this object because it can't go that fast and push something that fast and get rid of the rest of the energy. It's still going really fast. It's got a ton of momentum still in it. The object has left. It can't make contact with it. It can't give it any more energy. And so it's stuck holding the energy. So you really can't see that part. Right? Yeah. All right. So yes, lots of energy still in the spring going fast. Not so much energy left in the spring going slow. So the heavier the object, the higher the percentage, okay, of the energy in the spring that gets into the object. And the lighter the object, the lower the percentage of the energy that gets into the object. Okay, I don't know how to, I mean, yeah, I can think about it some more. Maybe I can think of a better analogy, some other way to explain it, but I'm just saying that's the best I can do. So if you're still confused, I can't do much for you. I don't think I can do much for you. As I think that's understandable, frankly. I think the point is grokkable. Oh, wrong button. Just making sure the point is understood. The point is that springs, I assumed for my whole life, that yes, they collect energy and they give the energy back, no problem. But yes, there's a catch. And it's an important catch to have knowledge of if you're going to do experiments with springs with a certain amount of energy and you're going to launch objects of different mass. You're going to have to recognize that you're not going to get the energy out of the spring as consistently, regardless of the mass. The mass you're pushing matters. The heavier it is, the more energy goes in. The lighter it is, the less energy. Just a fact. And it's a variable in the experiment that has to be accounted for because there is not a proportional relationship. There's a disproportional, non-symmetrical, uneven. And that's really important to acknowledge. Shit. All right. So next. So I don't know what to do with this "I'm confused" comment. So I'm gonna remove it just because it just encourages people to be little whiny bitches. Sorry. Anyway, whatever. All right, if photons are not a wave. So again, the argument is what evidence do you have that it's a wave? And all of it is like circumstantial, and it's all of this stuff of an interpretation of an experiment. It isn't something built into it. And so if you can't understand that a period between two events, two things happen. One thing happens, then there's a little time delay and another thing happens. That thing, okay, causes something you can call a frequency, and you can call it a wavelength. But the fact that you can call it that doesn't mean it's waving. Okay? It doesn't mean that it has any quality of being anything like a wave in a substance. It has no features of a wave except the fact that it's episodic. So, you're trying to say that every event that happens that's episodic is somehow wavesodic. And it's just not true. You can fire a gun, boom, 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 with a frequency. The bullets will hit the target with a frequency, a wavelength. They're not waving. Okay. Why do they have a frequency and a wavelength? Because these are the words we use. That's why. Do you think it's any more complicated than that? The only thing they have is a period between humps, right? That's it. That's what your wavelength is. A completion of a cycle, so to speak, in your wave theory. And in the particle theory, it would just be the time of the event. And there's just a time between events. And that's all there is. All right? And you can call that frequency, you can call that wavelength, but it's just a period between events. A unit of time. Okay. A single photon has frequency. So again, the argument has been made even by Einstein. And let's point out again that Feynman doesn't think they're waves either. All right. But clearly Einstein, in describing the photoelectric effect, pointed out that the energy is clumpy. It's not in some kind of wave kind of function where it gradually does something and then doesn't do something, or you can have a tiny part of a photon or a big photon. It's always the same amount the same unit of energy. And so you're just playing a game, okay, with words here. So a single photon, as described by me in the video you were commenting on, is clearly pointed out to be the frequency is just the time between events. That the photon is a composite object made of more than one event. Photons are events. They're something that happens to a surface. It's not a blob that hits a surface. All right, so it's not a frequency of photons hitting an object. It's a frequency of energy quanta, right? So, I mean, light quanta is Einstein's phrase. He's pointing out that it's made of quanta, bits. So again, would you write this crap to Einstein and say, no, Mr. Einstein, you're wrong. It can't be energy quanta. It can't be light quanta. All right, furthermore, photons are a quantization of light. So again, what does that even mean? Light and photons are synonyms, okay? Photons aren't light, and light isn't a photon, okay? It's all the same thing. You can't differentiate about using the term light and say you're talking about something other than photons, retard. Okay, so just too silly. So why are radio waves, X-rays, infrared radiation all waves? So again, I'm asserting they're not. And you can prove it with the radar experiment. So again, you just ignore all the evidence presented and just pretend that none of these arguments have been made, which makes your comment such a lie. So you can't be fair to a goddamn thing argued. So I did point out in the video, again, that the radio antenna experiment sort of just proves the point that these aren't waves interfering. Okay, so you have two radio sources producing the signal, and the signal in my argument is they're just bullets, okay, with a frequency. And the simple fact is I can take the receiver and put it in the middle there, and I can create the fringe pattern. That is, all I have to do is move this way or this way, and the signal will be on, and then off, and then on, and then off, and on, and then off. Fact. Okay? That's what it's going to do. The fringe pattern exists. This wave didn't interfere with this wave in any way whatsoever. And all it proves is all you're really saying is when these two things hit each other in phase, okay, that is, they hit at the same time from the two sides, the signal is preserved. And when they hit out of sequence, the signal is destroyed. It's a new frequency. Okay, it's a much higher frequency. So this was almost tested by Brozo in a microwave experiment. But the problem is detecting these very high gigahertz frequency photons is not as easy as people would think. The devices you're using to detect them are like crystals. They can only see one frequency, and that's it. And they can only vibrate at one frequency. So it doesn't make it very useful. They're not very good at picking up harmonics or any of that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's the simple truth of it. So here they're in phase. Here the two signals hit out of phase on the antenna. Antenna can't receive anything because the two signals are creating noise, destroying the other one's signal. So the two signals just end up being noise as far as the receiver is concerned. It can't find the 50 hertz anymore that it's tuned to receive. And but so it's giving a clear indication that this is not about waves interfering in space and all that kind of crap. And it's really just about in phase and out of phase. And it doesn't matter what the sources of the radiation are. You're just saying, is it in phase or is it out of phase? So I can have a photon, say, theoretically, that's 10 years old, and I could combine it, a piece of a photon. All right, still got its frequency, but it's got pieces missing. And I could have it fly here, and all it's got is two pieces, and it's missing the middle dot. And then I could shoot a little middle dot from some other location and hit the same location at the right time and fill in the blank. So essentially you could have a broken photon, and the two pieces are far apart, and there's a the missing one here. And then you can have another source merely, create the missing piece, put the missing piece in the right time. And now you've made a photon out of pieces from two other locations. And that's what's happening in the double slit and the single slit experiment. The single slit is the two surface experiment. The single impediment is the two surface experiment. That's why their patterns are very similar. And the double slit is the four surface experiment. Four sources, four places where broken pieces fly off. And then there's a 50-50 chance that when those pieces hit the surface, they're either heading in phase or they're heading out of phase. And that's why you have a 50-50 pattern. So it works perfectly as an explanation. No need for any wave theory. Okay, bullets at a frequency being in phase and out of phase works fine. And I've used the tipping point argument. It works perfect. No problem. So to imply that there's some obstacle I have not met, some experimental result I cannot explain, is just lying. It's dishonest. All right. So why do radio waves, X-rays, infrared radiation, all waves? So again, you're saying they are, and the argument is that doesn't fit the experiments though. So water waves don't create interference when there's one opening. Photons do. So there's a huge non-match between sound and light, and water and light. They're not the same thing. All right, these are all light photons, says you. Okay, by taking time to derivative of Faraday's law of Ampere's law in Maxwell's equation. So this is just more nonsense. So it'll have nothing to do with evidence, nothing to do with a fair, like I said, he's not going to explain to me why there's a double maxima in the double slit experiment, or the single slit for that matter. So explain, why is there a double center? Why is the center twice as wide? Do you have an explanation? Because the only explanation is it has to be two sources. Okay, two surfaces. All right, you can derive the wave equation relating to the second derivative with respect to space and the magnetic field. And again, it's completely unnecessary. So there's nothing in Maxwell's, there's no such thing as a wave equation or a wave function in Maxwell's math. So it's just a lie to imply you have to believe in waves at all. It's not in the math anywhere. There's vectors, straight line vectors. Okay. To the second derivative of the fields with respect to time, the proportionality is 1 divided by c squared. Again, a nonsense concept, c squared. All motion is considered to be a wave if it follows the wave equation, and it does. So there's no wave equation in Maxwell's math, so it's just a lie. And even Schrodinger's math isn't a wave. So it's just a lie to call it a wave, because it's not. There's nothing about it that's waving. Okay, if you pass light through two slits at the right distance from each other with respect to the wavelength of light, well, that is if you take the two slits and make the surfaces so close that there's no difference, they're essentially in the same location, then you can convert a double slit into a single slit. So if you make the slit so small that there is no, there's no vector of interference possible. There's no constructive or destructive pattern, because there's no length of travel that's a wavelength of distance longer. So all you've done is destroy the capacity to see the pattern. And so the true double slit pattern with open slits creates two patterns, an envelope pattern and the small pattern. And that's created by the fact that the furthest two surfaces is a very long distance. That is, lots of places where there's a wavelength of difference. And the two smallest distances between a surface, there are a lot fewer places where there's a wavelength of difference. Fact. And that's what creates the pattern. You scummy liar. All right. Always something. Yeah. Okay. All right. All motion is considered to be a wave, again, by you. It's considered, you consider it to be, this is your religious theory. You have no good evidence obliging anyone to believe it. Okay? You just don't. You just assert it. And the evidence is, in fact, is in complete contradiction. There is no match between water wave mechanics and photons. It doesn't work. The drawings that Young drew of two waves creating a pattern doesn't work for a real double slit experiment. Two waves can't make the pattern. It's not possible. If it follows this wave equation, and light does. So that's just made up crap. Okay. If you pass light through two slits at the right distance from each other with respect to the wavelength of light, it will form a diffraction pattern. So more bullshit. There's no such thing as a diffraction pattern. Diffraction is just a spreading of light. It doesn't make fringes. Diffraction just spreads light. No fringes. So it's just a lie to say there's something called a diffraction pattern. There is no such fucking thing. So it's just a lie. Diffraction pattern of peaks and nulls. No, it doesn't. So a single slit in water creates no diffraction pattern at all. It just hits the surface, spreads across the surface. That's it. No on-offs anywhere. Liar. Okay. This cannot be explained with purely by particles. And of course it can be. You just don't want to listen because you're a belligerent, weaselly religious shit. You're a bandwagon riding ignorant jackass, okay, who thinks you're smarter than somebody else and you're smarter than no one because your brain is full of nonsense, religious, dogmatic crap that they told you was true and you never understood it to be true. You just accepted it to be true because they told you it's the truth. You weasel. Okay. Yeah. All right. So there are a ton of arguments that could be made, defeating any kind of idea of a particle theory for these slit experiments. So let's just first understand the two patterns. That's the single slit pattern. All right. It has... yeah. I will fix this out. I'll just redraw it. Okay, so there's the two patterns. Single slit above, double slit below. Obviously, the double slit has a component of the single slit built into it, and it has this extra feature of these much closer, smaller nodes of on-off. And the simple argument is that is being created by the fact that there are two distances in the slit experiments, right? So these are your openings here. Two waves won't create this complex pattern. So your two waves popping out of here and interfering won't create this pattern. But what will is if you understand vectors coming from the surfaces. So if you just created scatter at the surfaces and said the scatter creates a capacity for the landing objects to be in phase or out of phase, there would be a 50-50 chance and it would be exactly this pattern. That's what force sources would create, is this pattern. So it works perfectly. Now the key feature in the single slit is this double maxima. And physics provides no explanation. I haven't seen one ever. Okay, so how does two waves, so their diagram is that there's two openings and you have this idea of two waves coming out and overlapping, okay, and doing this pattern, right? Now, it doesn't happen in water, okay? Water doesn't create any double maxima. So you have to explain, how does this two wave diagram create a double maxima in the center? Because there's no mechanics for it. There's no geometry that can create it. You can't figure out how, well, this vector and this vector, now that doesn't work. No. Two waves can't do it. Okay, it's just a fact. Two waves that close to each other inside of a single slit are two waves that aren't mathematically, that their centers aren't on a surface. there's no way to make that turn into that double maxima. And the only way you can do it is because you have the two surfaces at a distance. And it's really two different patterns. One pattern focused on this focus, the other pattern focused on this focus. And the illusion that there's the two waves meet in the center and the center is always an on. Well, no, it's not, because that's inside of less than a millimeter. Your pattern is a foot across. Okay, the fact that it's two center vectors inside of 1 millimeter is just one little tiny spot. You have to account for this big giant thing here. Okay, and that is being controlled by the fact that there's really two patterns, one going this way and one going this way. There's two focuses. The two circles, so to speak, aren't at the same focus. That's why there's a double maxima. Fact. Just saying. Fact. Yeah. Fact. So I don't think it's asking too much. If you're going to do this rhetoric thing, you have an obligation to explain. So link me to an explanation for why or how geometrically your two-wave theory creates a double maxima. Just show me that geometry, because there isn't any. Okay, until you show me, I have no reason to believe it exists, because I can't draw it. I can't find it. So you have to explain why it's there. And you're being unscientific to say you don't have an obligation to explain an anomaly so obvious. I mean, it's an obvious difference in the two patterns. You have to explain why it's there. If it's just like water, you have to explain why it's not just like water. Okay. So, Maxwell equations, despite him name dropping them hundreds of times, well, I don't even know if that's true. Again, I don't find it all that coherent to combine Maxwell's equations. I think Ampere and Gauss, we're talking about different things. I mean, there are different functions, and to assume that they're all doing exactly the same thing is, in my opinion, probably a grave mistake. So this goes back to all kinds of things to understand, and even the induction of electricity. I mean, you people are falling for some idea that induction is actually a process of the energy being pushed out of the wire and going somewhere, when the fact is it's just a symptom of electricity moving through a wire. The consequence of electricity moving through the wire is it changes how the atoms look. And changing how they look, that is, they look to the elemental force, means that they reflect the universe now with a different pattern. And that is the inductive energy. So the inductive energy is just what's already in the field. So I've made this argument already. I'm waiting to keep making it. But magnets don't produce any force. They're not producing. They're not an engine. There's not more energy going out of a magnet than goes into a magnet, right? So there's no... obviously you can't see that, so... yeah. Yes, it seems if I'm going to draw it, you might as well be able to see it. There's not more energy coming out of a magnet than has to go into the magnet. All right, so there's no force that's generated. It has no engine in it, no energy thing, no stored energy, no radiation energy. I mean, it's not like it's decaying and, atoms are flying apart. So there's no storage, there's no giving away of anything. So all it can possibly do is take what's coming in, all right, and change the way it looks. That's it. That's the only option it has, is the stuff comes in looking one way, mixed, and it comes out looking a different way. We could do a blue center and, a red outside, and we could do a red center and a blue outside. That's what's changing. How it reflects off the different parts of the surface, because the atoms on one side are pointed, okay, in one direction, and the back side looks different than the front side because of the orientation of the atoms. The atoms have a shape to their polarity, okay, and the shape is visible. This side can see that these are flat bottoms. This side can see that these are pointies, that kind of thing. They see a different amount of electrons and protons, a different mixture. They don't generate anything. They just reflect. And when you put electricity through a conductor, you create the same phenomenon, the same appearance. So now whatever energy hits the wire reflects polarized. Same energy. It's just now polarized. This all will be in the book of truth eventually. So, I mean, you could just keep doing this, show yourself to be belligerently stupid. Because that's all you're doing. You're demonstrating that you're belligerently stupid. Because I'm giving you perfectly viable, simple explanations of how reality functions. And you're just dismissing them without in any way debunking them. And you're pretending you're doing it in the name of science, when it's exactly what science is supposed to do, is investigate and test. And you're the ones running from those obligations, while you tell other people to do it, which is the irony. Test, why don't you do it? Why don't you? If you're going to tell me that 4 pounds dropped 1 foot is the same energy as 1 pound dropped 4 feet, well, why don't you show me it is? All right, so Maxwell's equations, despite him name-dropping them hundreds of times, it's not something he has ever sat down and looked at, so it's just a lie. Again, all these lies, I don't have an obligation to waste my time saying, well, that's a lie. Obviously, I've played lectures with Maxwell's equations in them, so it's just a lie to say I haven't looked at them, I'm not aware of them. Obviously, Gauss's law is the same thing as gravity and just has to do with the inverse square law substantially. And there's nothing else to it. There's units of charge just like there's units of gravity, time-dependent units. All right. I think he doesn't even know what an integral or derivative is. So what I know is that integrals are fine in the sense of averages, and trying to figure out some way to say, well, look, certain detail, we don't need 0.000001 accuracy. We just need something like 1% accuracy. So we can go ahead and make some assumptions. Okay, fine. I don't have any argument with that. But we know they don't do the integrals. So they just keep talking about, they put the signal there, but they don't do it, right? They don't do all the integrals and show just how tedious it really is. So it's not free. You don't get a free answer from an integral. You still have to do the process of subdividing a function over time, and unless it's a consistent curve or some other thing, you're going to have to do an awful lot of samples. So it's not a free ride. And derivatives, I have a real problem with, just because that just leads to per second bullshit. Okay, where you do a bunch of replacements that have nothing to do with what a velocity actually is. A velocity isn't how you measure a velocity. A velocity is a thing itself. The fact that you're kind of feeble in how you measure one doesn't mean your measurement technique is the actual thing. So it's like thinking the actual universe is math. It's not. All right. I would love to see him use a mathematical model. So I already have. It's just, it's hilarious because I'm saying, yes, it's all the same thing. So every single interaction can be described as a weight hitting a weight, a pressure hitting a pressure, and that's all there ever is. And so it's all broken down to the fact that you can just call anything, okay, just measure the weight, and you've measured the intensity, the force, the power, all of it. All right, simple physical. mathematical model to derive even a simple physical fact. So again, what math do you want me to do? And he just cites it right here. Will be pretty hard to do, so since he considers F equals P equals MV. How's that make it difficult? So show me what you want me to mathematically contrive an answer for, and then I'll say to you, well, yeah, give me the mass and the velocity, and I'll give you all the rest. That's all I need. Just give me the mass and the velocity. I'll tell you what the energy is. I'll tell you what the pressure is. I'll tell you what the weight is. I'll tell you all of that. Because that's all there is momentum. There's nothing else. Everything that interacts is an interaction between two things that have a momentum. That's it. A relative momentum, of course. Rather than F equals ma. So how does F equals ma make things simpler? It doesn't make anything simpler. Ma is just saying I'm going to take one tiny bit of its velocity, the part that's changing, okay, and give that the force I added, which of course, if you cause a change, it equals the force. But I mean, again, they're just denying Newton's own words. Twice the force, twice the velocity. 3 times the force, 3 times the velocity. Right underneath the second law. So there's no confusion. The force equals momentum. There's no way to turn into anything else. Of course, the force has to be a unit of momentum. 1 unit of momentum, 1 unit of increase in momentum. The force hits, you get an increase. You get 1 unit of force. It creates 1 unit of increase in your momentum. If you get 2 units of force, it creates 2 units of increase in your momentum. What's complicated? It's like 1 pound on the scale and then 2 pounds on the scale. You say there's 4 pounds on the scale, right? 2 pounds is really 4 pounds because it's 4 times the energy somehow. That's your wacky nonsense that you have no physical evidence proving. So again, just show me the evidence. Show me somewhere where it takes 100 times the fuel to go 10 times as fast, and where going 10 times as fast means you have 100 times the ability to do work. Show me one example of any of that. And of course you can't. You have no experimental evidence. You have no logic or reasoning to defend this religious proposition. You're just making a religious statement. You're not making anything called a scientific statement because you have 0 evidence defending it. 0 physical, credible evidence. 0. No, that should be enough. So I guess I'll have to make a photon video again. And there's, like I said, there's so many arguments is that, it's hard to make one video and remember all the arguments. So maybe I'll try to make it in pieces and just tie them together. Because there's so many ways you can understand that their diagram of the double slit experiment is nonsense. It doesn't do anything mathematically accurately or correctly. It doesn't get right answers, frankly. Except in special circumstances they contrive. In all the other real circumstances, wrong answer. If you're thinking there's 2 waves going through the openings, you're going to get the wrong answer. Okay, if you use the distance between the 2 wave centers to draw your vectors, you're not going to get any right answers. And that's the only way the water waves can be analyzed, is from where the wave centers are. That's the only math that works. Okay. So, till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. Just pitiful that there's just no evidence of any honest characters in this conversation. There's just nothing. They can't just own up and say, yes, our science should be better. It should have done these experiments. They certainly should have crashed a 10 mass going 5 into a 5 mass going 10 and figured out that, the 5 mass doesn't win. It has no evidence of having twice the energy. 0 evidence that that theory is correct, that it has twice anything, except a velocity. But it has half the mass. It has half the momentum. It has the same momentum but the portion coming from mass is half. Just there's no point in arguing with just lying scum, but that's all there are, and so I'll just do my job. My job is to make physics arguments. Your job apparently is just to lie and talk shit, and that's what you're proving. Decisively. No evidence, no drawings, no explanations, no reasoning, no logic, just shitty comments. Off the subject, frankly. Making assertions you have zero evidence for.